Seated comfortably, are we?
No.
Then we'll begin. We shall learn of some stories from the wonderful Mr. Andrew C. Ferguson.
Okay, I wasn't sure about where that introduction was going, Craig. You talked about Katie being at the start of her career. That kind of implies I'm at the end.
No.
You know something that I don't. Yep, I am Andrew C. Ferguson. I write stories of varying word lengths. I experiment with word lengths. Some of your other performers tonight, ladies and gentlemen, may have experimented with Class A substances. I experiment with word lengths. I think that the shortest short story genre is the six-word story. The most famous exponent was Hemingway, and his six-word story was something like baby for sale, baby shoes, never worn. So, inspired by that, my six-word story is a kind of science fiction story. Hermaphrodite surgery, fashionable. Go fuck yourself. So, in true tradition, you kind of get a choice with me. You can have, to start off with, to start off with, I'm not giving you a choice. I'm going to give you a story about cricket because I am one cricket fan the other, one more than I thought it would. But I'm a Hibs fan and I'm suffering. So, it's stupid. Puerile game. So my real love actually is cricket. This is called organic geometry. The exact physical properties that make a cricket ball swing when it leaves a fast bowler's hand have never been fully explained. Like the flight of the bumblebee or a baseball pitcher's curved ball, the evidence is open to interpretation. Mumtaz Mohammed's brief test career took speculation to another plane entirely. Wisden, the cricketing Bible, described Mumtaz at the end of his first international season. His approach to the point of delivery is not so much a run-up as a kind of serene dance. At the wicket itself there is an explosive whirl of arms and legs, long black hair and flashing teeth from which the ball emerges. Although not much above fast medium, Mohammed surprises batsmen with prodigious sideways movement. Wisden didn't report the tales Mumtaz's victims whispered to each other late in the bar after the game. The most common story was of seeing a swaying cobra halfway down the pitch as the ball left his hand. Wisden did note that Mumtaz's family had emigrated to Pakistan from Afghanistan when he was 12, saying, Mohammed learnt his cricket in the foothills, playing on whatever flat piece of ground there was, overlooked by the cloud-covered mountains and the village elders. He and his teammates played a game imposed by the British Empire, but adopted with near religious fervour in that remote region of the subcontinent. The purple prose was inspired by Mumtaz's international debut against England at Lord's. He bowled out the entire English team in both innings, a feat unrivalled in international cricket before then. The replays showed a cricket ball apparently defying the laws of physics, swinging first towards the batsman, then away again. When asked how he did it, Mumtaz would simply smile and shrug. With Mumtaz in the side, Pakistan became the team to beat in world cricket. His teammates, inspired by his example, pulled together and topped international averages. On tour in India, a rumour started that Mumtaz got the ball to behave unpredictably by rubbing hair oil in it. The hair oil manufacturer met Mumtaz in Delhi and offered him $1 million for one advert. But why would I take money to tell a lie? Mumtaz asked him, smiling as always. Because it's a lie only you and I know about, the businessman said, checking no one else was in earshot. But Allah hears everything, Mumtaz said, and I'm here to do his will, not yours. The next day, Mumtaz appeared from the dressing room, shaven-headed. Taking the new ball, he dismissed all 10 Indian batsmen in the space of 9 overs. Even his critics had to admit that, however he did it, it wasn't with hair oil. Other organisations were also keen to use Mumtaz's name. Afghan and Pakistani Islamic sects made much of his religious beliefs, until that is, someone pointed out his family belonged to a branch of the religion that, like most of Islam, abhorred violence. In fact, his sect regarded the ending of all violence as the surest way of entering paradise. Shortly after Pakistan beat Australia at home, Mumtaz brought out his autobiography, Outward Journey. It was a disappointment to many. Matches were described in obsessive detail, with weather, field placings and tactical decisions receiving pride of place. There was little about his bowling and nothing about his swing. Mumtaz wrote in the introduction, "Cricket is sometimes described as chess on grass. In truth, it is closer to a form of organic geometry, which, when mastered, can lead to mastery of greater things. The will of batsman, bowler and fielders are simply vectors in a much more complex equation." At the end of his third season, Mumtaz announced his retirement from all levels of cricket and retreated, still smiling, back over the border to Afghanistan. "My outward journey is completed," he told the Pakistani Prime Minister. In his absence, his teammates fell out with each other again. A month or so later, some Afghan insurgents were under heavy bombardment from government forces. Things looked desperate for the rebels. They were trapped on a ridge with little natural cover. Heat-seeking missiles began to fall on them like infidel rain. Then, to their amazement, the US-made weaponry began to miss them by a huge margin, exploding harmlessly away from the rebel camp. They stood on the ridge, waving their AK-47s in defiance. Then they discovered their own rocket launchers were just as incapable of hitting any target they aimed at. The two forces stared at each other across the valley, nonplussed. The era of organic geometry had begun. I do feel, Craig's been very nice, but I do feel a bit of a fraud turning up reading prose at a thing called Hello Poetry. I feel I should start a rival offshoot called Hello Prose. Splitters. So I'm going to do you one poem, which is kind of a found bit of poetry. I am in my spare time a lawyer, and that doesn't quite attract the booze it used to. Now the bankers are the bad guys. It's loud, whatever. Bankers, woo.
As long as you can keep us out of the jail.
No, I'm rubbish. I'm rubbish at that. I work for the council. And what really pisses me off about adverts is the bit at the bottom, all the disclaimers. It's like this kind of form of, Sarah was talking about autism, it's like a form of autism. You have to, obsessively say what, as if somebody's going to sue them. They're not going to sue them. So that kind of annoyed me, so I kind of started writing them down. The nights go on and on. Started writing down all the wee disclaimers that come up in the adverts. So fast you can't see them, so write them down. Make a poem out of it. And then it kind of got mashed up in my head with a Nick Cave song called I Call Upon the Author to Explain. And so what came out was kind of a mash-up. It's called I Call Upon the Lawyer to Explain. What we once thought we had, we didn't, and what we have now, we will never be that way again. So we call upon the lawyer to explain. Dramatisation, styled with lash inserts and refined in post-production. For guidance and entertainment purposes only. Available while stock lasts. Treatment subject to assessment. 73% of 129 women agreed. Well, they knew exactly who to blame, weirdly on wings and with maximum pain, and we call upon the lawyer to explain. Who is this great burdensome slavering dog lawyer that mediocres my every thought? I feel like a vacuum cleaner, a complete sucker. It's fucked up and he is a fucker. All you have to do is pay taxes and charges. Delivery limitations and charges may apply. Terms and conditions apply. Height restrictions apply. Weekly meeting fee applies. Excludes Channel Islands. NI. Well, thank you, and again call upon the lawyer to explain. Prolix, nothing little disclaimer will fix. Rampant discrimination, mass poverty, third world debt, infectious disease, global inequality, optimal growing up milk should be part of a balanced diet. See promotional packs for details and deepening socio-economic divisions in addition to your statutory rights. Proof of purchase required. Some products may contain traces of nuts. But what an enormous and encyclopedic brain to call upon the lawyer to explain. Redemption value, 0.001 pence. 1 child per adult, subject to availability. Prolix, there's nothing, little disclaimer to be fixed. So now you can have one of two stories. You can have something called Cursed Elven Revenge, or you can have my homage to Nero Spark called The Slime of Miss Jean Brodie. Good choice. It's good. I like this one. I will not seek a job in one of the so-called progressive schools, she said. My true station is here. I am the leaven in the lump. At least that is what it sounded like. Miss Brodie's cut glass vowels were a little less clear than usual when she assumed the form of a many-tentacled abomination from her more imaginative colleagues' worst nightmares. Besides, on this occasion, there was a distance factor to consider. The staff and pupils of Marcia Blaine School, those of the Brodie set in particular, were used to Jean Brodie's shape-shifting into monstrous form at moments of personal crisis. Normally, she could be contained within a classroom. This time, however, she had quite literally gone too far. With the headmistress, Miss Mackay, securely grasped up to the neck in one tentacle, the creature sat atop the dome of the school as if it were an egg waiting to be hatched. The slime of Miss Jean Brodie glistened on the green copper of the roof in the golden October light. Her skin pulsed in mainly autumnal colours of brown and orange. My teaching methods would not be questioned in Italy, where Signor Mussolini has a system running perfectly, she burdened down. In most cases, the school could simply lock the classroom door and let Miss Brodie rant until she ran out of steam and morphed back into human form. She was generally harmless so far as the pupils locked in with her were concerned. However, now there was Miss Mackay to consider and her precarious position. Sandy Stranger, who was to write a book on psychology and then become a nun many years later, trained her tiny eyes on the roof. The squid-like monstrosity seemed bigger than usual, despite the perspective. Fragments of tweed suit and underclothing had fallen off like a discarded shell, and its mother-of-pearl interior on the ascent and now hung defiantly from the guttering. If Miss Brodie could not be coaxed down in time, she would revert to a state of nakedness in full view of the boys on bikes now gathering at the school gate. Then the shot rang out, cracking the crisp October air wide open. It was ironic, of course, that it was Teddy Lloyd, the one-armed art teacher Miss Brodie had offered herself to who should have brought down the ancient school fowling piece from the headmistress's study, primed with gunpowder from the jar Miss Lockhart kept that might blow up the whole school, and used it to end Jean Brodie's rooftop protest. Et tu, Teddy! Serves you right for calling me stupid all the time, said Mary McGregor, who was so stupid that she would die in a fire in a hotel in Cumberland years later, running this way and that as flames engulfed both ends of the corridor. If anyone heard her, they ignored her. The many-tentacled thing that was Miss Jean Brodie and her terrified victim slid gracefully down the grey slates of the school roof. Some of the girls were crying, and not just the Brodie said, when she hit the concrete below with an élan that Anna Pavlova herself might have found difficult to replicate. The creature opened its 7 compound eyes one last time. Oh, ma femme, ma commencement, it gurgled. Then Miss Mackay, whose fall had been broken by that of the creature, stood up, and everyone saw why the last words of Mary Queen of Scots had a special resonance. Everyone, that is, who was sufficiently advanced in science to know the significance of the puncture marks on Miss Mackay's arm. The subsequent story of Miss Mackay's pregnancy and the disposal of the creature she gave birth to was, of course, hushed up by the authorities. The crew of the sewage freighter Gardy that took it out into the Forth and dumped it with their usual payload were well paid for their silence. The tale one of them told that the bitter waters of the Forth's outer reaches revived the creature and that it could then be seen swimming purposefully upriver has never been substantiated. Nor has the other account that it came ashore, took roughly human form, and became a favourite lecturer at Julian-esque film. In any event, the war intervened, and people had other things to worry about. It was not until the 50s that the rumours began to surface, and the school's board of governors hired Muriel Spark, a former head girl at Marcia, Blaine, to write the sanitised version. This is, are there any Franz Kafka fans in tonight? Oh, 1, 2, yeah, great. And 3, very good. You can form a wee society. Those of you who are not familiar with his oeuvre, there is the famous story called Metamorphosis about a man who wakes up from so I decided to update it, and it's called Metamorph. One morning, as Greg Sampson was waking up from anxious dreams, he discovered that in his bed he had been changed into a monstrous verminous insect. When he didn't go off to work as usual, his father, mother and sister Greta gathered outside his door. Only Greta was brave enough to look inside. "What will we feed him?" his mother said. "Cockroaches eat leftovers," his father said. "Greta, go and get that chicken tikka masala from last night, dear." "This is going to ruin my audition," Greta said, flouncing off downstairs. Greg tried to speak to them, to say he really wasn't hungry and that nothing should stand in the way of Greta's X Factor audition. All they could hear was the clicking of his mandibles. One of the East European lodgers suggested his father contact Max Clifford. Next day, the Guardian headline read, "Kafkaesque nightmare comes true for call centre worker." The Sun said, "X Factor girl's bug brother." Oh. The Daily Mail went with, "Is immigration behind cockroach epidemic?" His boss from the call centre was ever so nice when he came by to see why Greg hadn't turned up for his shift, his mother was quoted as saying. But he told us he'd have to let Greg go. It's a health and safety issue. The man from the British Zoological Society was a spry little chap in a tweed jacket. "Your son isn't a cockroach, he's a dung beetle," he told Greg's parents. "You mean he eats?" Greg's father started to say. "The clue's in the name." Greta's audition went well. Her version of Make You Feel My Love was shaky, to say the least. But when Simon Cowell heard her backstory, she was a shoo-in for the boot camp stage. The next day, excuse me, Greta and her mother came into Greg's room and took away all his furniture. "But it gives me somewhere to hide from the photographers," Greg said. They ignored him, still unable to make out what he said. He climbed onto the ceiling to be out of their way. "Max said to your dad, we should release the bed and the chair separately on eBay," Greg heard his mother say to his sister. "He'll put out a release about it being healthier for him if he has more room to scuttle about." On the night of the X Factor final, Greg crept out of his room to see how Greta got on. But when one of the East European lodgers saw him, she screamed, and his father chased him upstairs with a rolled-up copy of Nuts. "Don't hit him," his mother said. "That's the issue with Greta in it, remember?" Things went from bad to worse there. The lodgers called in environmental health because of the smell from the elephant dung, and the whole household moved out to a bigger place on the royalties from Greta's misery memoir, leaving Greg to wander round the empty shell of the family home. He died soon after, and Damien Hirst came out of semi-retirement to preserve his body from murder. He called the piece Modern Society and exhibited it at the Tate. Unfortunately, the legal battle over the rights to the artwork exhausted every last penny the family had. The lodgers went back to Eastern Europe, and the Sampsons had to sell their new house to pay the lawyers. They had no choice but to move back into their own home, where a hitherto unknown species of tiny cockroaches with golden carapaces bit them in their beds at night, which did nothing for their drug and alcohol dependencies. Only the man from the British Zoological Society was happy. Thank you very much.
It was Mr. Andrew C. Ferguson.